everyone, and welcome to the September edition of 3030. I am Pat Reinhardt of Conductor, and as always, thank you so much for spending 30 minutes of your very valuable time with me. Watson and I here to give you what's happened over the last 30 days in search, so let's get into it. What are we going to be talking about today? Again, something that I think I've mentioned on just about every program for the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months is, Google's crazy volatility and how much they've been rolling out. That trend continued over the last 30 days, but actually feels or looks or seems that it's even more volatile than usual. So I wanted to kind of talk that. What I'm going to do is I went through, typically I go through about 150 sites in various verticals and industries. And today I figured I would go through those industries that I usually watch and give an example of a site in each of those. And then just kind of talk through what I've been seeing over the last 30 days. So I think that is something that will be good to go through, just to talk through that. Also, just from around the web, saw a couple of interesting articles, had a couple of interesting conversations. One was that talking about website quality and that it's not just about doing technical changes; it's about looking at your site as a whole. Nothing crazy there, but what it really is that this is one of those SEO truths, right? And I try to get one or two of these in every program, knowing that we have new folks joining, every single month, and they may not be as, versed in SEO as some of us. I always like to kind of confirm those SEO truths when I see Google, kind of talk about them. And that kind of leads to the next one as well, talking about category page content, which I think I get this question once a week, like how much content should I put on a category page? And that's in all different types of verticals and industries and things of that nature. So we're going to talk about that. Also, one thing that I found super interesting that one of my buddies put me up to is that Martin Splitt of Google, had been talking about pre-rendering, and how that you don't need all your site's functionality working when pre-rendering with Googlebot. Again, good to see some confirmation that. Also kind of a gray area. What do you need to show Google to not get pinged? But at the end of the day, there's that. And finally, we are going to be doing the poll next Tuesday. For the new logo for 3030. That's something that I was planning on doing in August, just to remind everybody. But then recognize that everyone was on vacation, and that probably was a poor time to do it. So we are going to do that next week. I'm looking forward to that. We'll talk about it, but let's get into it now because we only have 30 minutes. Number one, Google's crazy volatility continues. So over the last 30 days, we have been on a wild ride with Google, and I apologize for that typo, which will bother me the entire time I'm on this slide, but it meant to say wild ride. And we've seen some major peaks and valleys, right? So what's going on? As we discussed over the last year, really been talking about it specifically over the last 6 to 8 months, Google's has been rolling out more and more updates into the algorithm, right? And more things have been are being tested, right? So from that standpoint, when you look at Google, this is SEMrush's sensor. This is the one I typically look at. Again, SEMrush is one of our largest data partner. And at the end of the day, there have been many spikes in the index sensor, right? And what we're looking at is not necessarily the yellow, it's the reds. Typically there's 1 or 2 peaks or 1 or 2 days that hit that red mark, right? But really since August 17th, so again, about 30 days, right? We've seen not one, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 spikes into that very high zone, which means that there is something going on, right? There is something going, right? And again, from that standpoint, I always go through when we're talking about thing like volatility in the index and volatility in the algorithm. And today I kind of want to go through the process that I go through and give examples, right? And give some data points, and talk about the different verticals that I usually look at. I typically try to generalize it, just so folks at all levels can kind of absorb it and find value in it. Today I'm going to go a little bit deeper than I typically do because this is one of those cases where it's like, hey, over the last 30 days there's been a lot of spikes, and just kind of wanted to see what we've been seeing. So the first one that I'm going to show is the retail, right? And this is one example of many sites I look at in the retail sector, right? But the interesting part is I do typically see the same, trends within those verticals, right? So I kind of broke these down into rankings and performance. Again, just very simple, ways to kind of look at it, not have to go too deep into it. But rankings remain fairly consistent across the retail brands. To the right, you see an example of a site that saw movement in page one, especially the top three. Little bit of a decrease, but nothing crazy, like one-ish percent. So nothing out of the ordinary for normal ebbs and flows of the algorithm. But again, and kind of, on that August, when you look at like the end of the week of August 7th to the last publish, we can see that largely rankings remain the same, right? Rankings remain the same. And that's looking right about from here over to here. And then when you look at performance, this is the interesting part, right? Largely positive side for retail sites, largely positive. So when you look at page views, especially towards the end of the last couple of months, right? Or the last couple of weeks, excuse me. So when you look at page views for this particular site, which is a good example of what I was seeing, which is the yellow line, you can see that there's a steady increase between the highlighted version. So this is the area that we're looking for, right? Between this August 7th publish and the September 11th publish. Be interested to see what happens this week when we publish on Saturday. So we're seeing there is that steadily increasing to a total increase of 8%. That's a lot. And then revenue, which is in green, which is this green line right here, you can see that really around this time started to see an increase, a little bit of a normalization, and then last week a big pop, right? And a pop to upwards of 54% higher, right? And what does that tell me? What does that tell me? Just looking at that, is that definitely that the SERPs are changing. And again, just because they didn't lose total page one visibility doesn't mean that a lot of keywords didn't move around on page one, and a lot of keywords came into page one and left page one, right? So what I was seeing is that even though we saw revenue and we saw page views increase, total sessions were actually down 4%. This was a trend that I saw in almost all of the retail sectors, sites that I was looking at, which was super interesting, right? And that was. This was interesting because anyone who joins the program regularly, a couple of months ago, we noticed the same trend. And if everyone remembers, I showed a screenshot of Google Search Console of Google Search Console, and from that standpoint, it was we saw that impressions and clicks were inverted. And typically they travel with one another. So that was interesting. That was interesting at the end of the day. So from that standpoint, definitely something that we were seeing from here. Again, one of the things, and thank you, you definitely, 2 people chimed in where I always have to put an asterisk on this. Between the weeks of September 4th, September 11th, you have people going back to school, you have people going back to work. Again, you have people who are also, doing a lot of, office openings. We went back to the office last Monday. Labor Day weekend would account for some potential risk for a holiday shopping weekend. 100%. This particular site sells a very specific type of product, which is why I used it as the example. They did run a Labor Day. They did run a Labor Day Labor Day sale, and that definitely contributed to the pop. But as you can see, even before that, and I think really if you take this last week out of it, like let's say you take this out of it, leading up to that, there was nothing running on this site, right? There was nothing running on the site. No deals were running on this site up until that one weekend, right? They didn't do like a week before or anything of that nature. So you do see a trend upwards, and we had a lot of volatility during that, during that 4-week period. So definitely something to consider as well. Another question here, would the volatility behavior in retail sites also show a drop in organic search overall, even though the sales conversions remain strong or up? See, and Ryan, thank you for that question. That's the interesting, question here, right? Is that, for me, when I see that sessions are down, but revenue, like total sessions are down, but revenue and page views are up, that tells me that more transactional keywords, right, are probably driving sessions, which means that you're probably seeing more quality traffic going through the site. A lot of the times, traffic goes up, you get a lot of people who just window shop and don't actually buy something. seeing that, sessions going down, but you still see revenue going up, even when you exclude Labor Day weekend, because, even there, page views, that tells me that people are staying on the site longer, which means they're shopping longer and they're looking to buy. But when revenue goes up and sessions are going in the other direction, that just tells me that the right type of traffic is coming up. Because again, traffic is all great. Don't get me wrong, but traffic doesn't mean revenue, right? And that's why it's always like, listen, our traffic could get cut in half, but if our revenue and transactions doubled, does anyone really care? Obviously, that's not what happened here, but that to me is what this is saying, is that we're probably seeing more transactional keywords, come into play here. Also, remembering the last episode of the program, we were talking about Google changing title tags. I would love to be, I would love to, see what was what would be happening, that how that would be contributing to it. And I did see someone was doing a study, which I'm definitely going to be digging into, coming in for the next next few weeks, and I'll report back next time. But just an interesting finding, and that's what I was seeing in retail. So moving on, aggregator sites. So this is one where, these are just, sites that aggregate all different types, right? It's not specific to one area. It's not finance. It's not, anything like that. But, this is a large aggregator site, and, has millions and millions and millions of people going through it every day, tracks thousands and thousands and thousands of keywords. And for this, for these folks, a little bit of a ride here, right? We're seeing a lot of up and down. You can see here that when this started, that, definitely top 3 keywords start to go down and then start to come back up again. You can see that little bit of a bell curve there, which is interesting. Overall, page 1 rankings, dipping by about 4% over the course of that time, and then increasing by 1%. So you're losing about 4% during this part, and then increasing 1%. So it'll be interesting to see, this published, to see if that bell curve comes back to, full, kind of full tilt, and which is interesting. But when you look at traffic, you do see a little bit of that. You do see the trend as well as rankings go down and come back up. You see exactly the same thing with page views, and you see the like a very a similar trend of things starting to go down and then start to tilt back up slightly in total sessions, right? So looking at this, and again, the yellow, the page views, page views dipped by 8% over the last 30 days. But for this site, which equates to almost 1 million, page views, so that's not insignificant. And sessions, blue, dipped by 8%, which is over 200,000, total sessions. That's a lot of traffic, kind of in the, influx for this, even though, they're getting, 11, plus million visits, on a weekly basis. Losing 1 million, no one wants to lose 1 million page views. No one wants to lose 200,000, total visits. So that's definitely something to, if you run an aggregator site, that's just definitely something that I saw, checking over the many that we track. So right now, my call is like not really a good ride for aggregators at the moment. Just a little bit of a ride, but it does look like that they're coming back positive, and we'll have to see what happens next week when the next publish comes in. For healthcare, not a great story. So from here, not really fared well during this ride, right? This site in particular, 3% drop off in total page 1 keywords, and you can just see that, that actually started well before this, started here, and you can see that the decline, kind of started through a lot of the volatility even before this. And healthcare is a tough arena, healthcare is a tough area, a lot of scrutiny there. Google has been, Google's been really leaning in on authority, and everything there. From a performance standpoint, not a great story here, right? Definitely down overall. We saw declines from previous updates, as I said. The site, overall has seen a 4% decline in performance over the last 30 days. Again, not insignificant for this site. They're getting hundreds of thousands of visits every week, so that's a big hit to the business, right? Interesting note here that healthcare sites that have a local component, if you're working with assisted living facilities or hospital systems, which is what this is mainly looking at, is a lot of hospital systems, a lot of senior living homes and aggregators for that. Definitely saw a further decline during this, right? And this is something I did see overall when I looked into it a little bit more. Across all those sites, saw largely a decline across, not as significant as this, but this one I felt was a good example that shows the trend of what we've seen. But very interesting to see that across everything that's health related. Really good question here. Do you expect an increase in October when most companies have open enrollment? Maybe. It just depends, right? Like if like for insurance, definitely. This is not only insurance companies or folks that provide healthcare solutions for companies. This again, healthcare, I kind of bucket hospital systems in there. I bucket senior living homes. I bucket insurance companies and things of that nature. So that's one aspect of it, and those sites 100% will. But for this particular site, this site is not one of them. And certainly, of course, hoping that we are starting to see it turn the other way. Last week, it looked like we had started to plateau. So definitely hoping that moving forward that we're going to say here. Another one, managing a healthcare site, not seeing this trend, but we are more local, regional with some national conversions. Interesting. Yeah, again, like the local piece of it was good. Was interesting that we saw a lot more local results in these results, like in these type of results that healthcare typically puts back. We saw a big increase in local PAC results that definitely would definitely impact this particular site, but may not impact everyone. So to your point, Tim, that it might not be impacting everyone, but largely this was something I was seeing across many of the sites that I was reviewing. But good call out there. That local regional did well. If you have a big local regional feel, we saw a huge increase in local results, so that would actually make sense if you saw an increase there. Moving on to hospitality. So hotels, things of that nature, so rankings were largely unimpacted, maybe up slightly. This example in particular, they're tracking a ton of keywords, get a ton of traffic on a weekly basis. Really 2% increase in overall page one rankings, but nothing outside the normal ebbs and flows, nothing crazy. I looked across a ton of hospital sites, a lot of hospitals, hotels, hotel sites, and didn't see anything here. Performance though was down in the segment, but that's more than likely a seasonality thing because it really took the dump in the last week. Which is basically like summer vacation season coming to an end, people going back to school, offices reopening in many parts of the country. So from here, we saw a 13% decrease in page views. That's the purple line. Even though the decrease for that started back in July, again, that kind of makes sense. People had already booked their vacations for Labor Day and things of that nature by then. And then that last Labor Day weekend, people are on vacation. So not really booking anything. And I would assume, and this also followed the same path, that all these sites saw last time around, last year and even 2019. It's really hard to compare, hospitality to last year. So if folks are, and actually like kind of comparing anything to last year doesn't really make sense. Just given where the pandemic was, where the world was. Things are, getting somewhat back to normal. Still a long way to go, I believe. But at the end of the day, for most hotels, comparing this to 2019, definitely saw like the exact same trend where, again, a 10% decrease in sessions, which is the blue line at the bottom. Again, same thing that we've seen over the last several years. So nothing surprising in the hospitality section. Oh, I'm sorry, my mouse was in the way. The decrease in page views was 13%. So for this site, that is sizable. When you're comparing this, this date to this date, so that was, so it's a sizable decrease, but again, that kind of makes sense because of just, the time of year. And again, comparing it to 2019, we saw, basically the same trend. 2020 was all over the place, especially for hospitality. So it's not really fair to make a comparison to that year. Real estate. So this is we have a lot of real estate companies. This one, is one of the larger ones. From a ranking standpoint, I was kind of disappointed in this one because after seeing the large shift in local rankings for the healthcare sector, I was expecting a larger increase in local PAC for the real estate sector, or at least a big shakeup in the rankings in the local PAC. Obviously, having the local PAC makes sense because it's location based. But at the same time, I was expecting more of a shakeup, but really didn't see anything. Really didn't see anything. So it flat both from a rankings and from performance perspective. So from that standpoint, this example, just 1% increase. Page one rankings overall, nothing out of the ordinary. from a performance standpoint, pretty flat across the board. This saw also 6%. But what we did see, what was interesting, which I couldn't get a good visual here because it just looked like a straight line at the bottom. Is basically that performance for this sector was higher. This particular site saw a 6% increase in overall goals, which is to book a tour. And to come and actually see the space, see the building. And that I did see across the board, that we did see between a 3 and 8% increase, depending on what site I was looking at or what group of sites I was looking at. And to me, that is exactly what I just was just talking about, is that a lot of people are, looking for office space. A lot of people are going back to work, and a lot of people are changing office space now and planning to go back to work. So not surprising there to see that, even though that rankings and traffic were flat, those folks were always looking at the site, but they weren't necessarily pulling the trigger, just given the state of the world. Now that things are somewhat getting back to normal, not surprising to see that increase. Not surprising to see that increase there. Last one is finance, which I'll go through. How we doing on time? Got 8 minutes. I can do it. So finance remains steady. For the last 30 days, again, 1% increase, nothing crazy here. We have a ton of financial services and financial sites, that I look through. So nothing really of note here. Again, performance remains somewhat steady as far as, sessions go. Page views, dipped in that last part of August. Again, not surprising, given that in the U.S. you have a lot of people on vacation, most people that work at a financial organization, especially banks and things of that nature, depending on your job, you have to take 2 weeks off to make sure, it's a law. Make sure you're not cooking the books. So a lot of people take their 2 weeks, in August, so that is not surprising. Again, looking back to 2019, excuse me, saw a similar trend there, and that is something that's consistent pretty much every year. Conversion performance on this particular site was down 25%, but again, not surprising because a lot of people are on vacation. A lot of people are not in the finance sector, take their vacation, take that 2 week period at that time. And so nothing really crazy there. So that is everything that I saw from all the volatility that we have experienced over the last 30 days. Covering off on some more general topics, I thought that this was an interesting one. So Google's John Mueller, basically said that your website quality is about your site overall, not just technical changes. And by technical changes, what he means is like updating your title tags, page speed, core web vitals, all the things that you can, change on a day-to-day basis. That's part of the equation, but not the whole equation. And what he said was that, just to read it verbatim, website quality is not something you can fix with technical changes. If you want search engines to take your site more seriously, you really, really need to improve the game there. And that's really, it makes sense, right? And that's not something, again, I like to confirm, SEO truths, over time. And, this is just one of them, right? And if anyone who has, ever read any of Glenn Gabe's stuff over the years, he talks about the kitchen sink approach, and has been for many, many years, that it's not just about one or two things that you can fix. It's about continuously keeping the hygiene of your site at a high level. And anyone here who may be new to SEO or new to the program, or maybe has not heard this before, that is definitely something that you want to maintain, right? It's very easy to become obsessed with one or two things in SEO, and that will typically only hurt you in the long run when you have that tunnel vision. Tunnel vision gets worse as time goes on, and sometimes having some people that having people focus on one or two things can actually be detrimental, because you stop paying attention to other parts of the site. So that's something to take into account. Quick question here. Did you say that there are certain U.S. finance companies that are required to take their 2 weeks vacation in August? Or are you referring to international banks with heavy European presence, since Europe goes on vacation in August? No, so I was referring to, depending on what financial, like let's say you work for Goldman Sachs, right? And you're in wealth management. You are required by law to take 2 weeks at some point during the year to make sure that you are not basically stealing from the company. That is something you don't have to take it in August, but just a lot of people do take it in August, but you're not required to take it in August. Also a very good point that Europe is on vacation in August as well. But I was speaking specifically to, the necessity that many folks in finance, are required to take 2 weeks consecutively sometime during the year. So that definitely, and a lot of those people take that time in August around Labor Day, so that they don't come back to a mountain of work. But that was what I was talking about. But very good point about Europe as well. Googs, so don't overdo it with content on category pages. I get this question once a week. And it's basically, hey, we have all these content pages, all these category pages. How much content should I put on a category page? So from that standpoint, the gist is really just, John Mueller came out, he was asked the question, he's asked it several times a year. Most news outlets, cover this topic whenever it comes up. I think I actually saw this one on Search Engine Roundtable. I think Barry covered it. But for the gist of it, if this was during Google, like a Google office hours, which he does, often. And really what it is that that little bit of content is useful, but don't overdo it and add too much. Meaning that if you have a category page on an e-commerce site, and really it was about an e-commerce site, and I won't read this entire thing. Everyone will get the deck afterwards. That basically, it's like you don't need to put a novel of content. You don't need have to put a novel of content, to get rankings, right? Especially on an e-commerce site. Typically, folks say anywhere between 200 and 300 words is fine. But some category pages you go and there's like 2,000 words on it, and it pushes the product set down. Or people chop it up and maybe you put a little blurb on top and then a big blurb on the bottom below the product set. I know a lot of e-commerce sites that have had a lot of success with that. But at the end of the day, for anyone out there running e-commerce, you don't have to go nuts. You don't have to have a full novel, full novel on the site. A great question. What do you consider a category page outside of e-com? Really, it's anything that's in your top navigation. Like I would say like L1 and L2 pages. Level 1 or level 2 pages that that lead to something deeper within the site or more specific. So really the broad pages. So let's say you had a cybersecurity device, right? And you had the site wasn't necessarily large, but you had the 3 L1 pages would be like what we do, how the technology works, and product specifications. Right, I would say, and then below that you had specifics that went through each of those things. Those top level pages I would consider category pages. Also, if you worked in like healthcare and you sold like medical supplies, right, and you had things that were specific to like medical wear, like scrubs and gloves and things of that nature. Like medical wear would be the category page, and then you probably have a gloves page, and then you would have products underneath that gloves, in that gloves category page. So that's what I would mean there. Tell that to very good, very fair. Tell that to the SERP results. All top ranking e-commerce sites have Wikipedia articles at the bottom of their category pages. 100%, Catherine. I know. And so it's interesting. Again, I like bringing these things up when Google states them specifically. So it's something interesting. And again, it's an opinion, whatever works for you. I have some category like e-commerce sites that have a novel on them that work great. And that's the strategy that they use. But Google is giving the direction that you don't necessarily have to do that. We're running a little late on time here. Last thing I wanted to cover. So Google's Martin Splitt came out and was talking about pre-rendering. Which is rendering a page, for Googlebot, and a different version for Googlebot and the user. A lot of discussion around this all the time on whether it's okay to show something different to Google and to the user. And apparently it is. Martin Splitt came out and said that when pre-rendering for someone had asked when pre-rendering for Gbot, does all site functionality need to work as it would for a user? And basically, he said not for Google search, so you don't have to have every single functionality. So I think that and I think that that's something that's worth that's worth discussing, right? And also, someone that when pre-render, does all site functionality need to work, or does add to cart need to be actually add to cart? Does the mobile menu need to be open when clicked on? And he said no. That's super interesting. That to have a site render differently for Google, that could help you with Core Web Vitals, that could help you with page speed, depending on how your site operates. So that's something that to keep in mind, that you don't need to, because a lot of people worry that if they don't pre-render the exact same page, that the user sees, that Google will penalize them in some way. And Martin, came out and said that is not the case. So with that said, very quickly, I know we're running out of time. We are doing the poll next Tuesday for the new lead page on 3030. Please look out for that post and help me decide. I really appreciate it. You guys have always spent a lot of time with me. And with that, remember, we talked a lot about algorithms today, but the only algorithm that really matters is the one between you and your customers. Make sure if you create good content that people care about and love, they will come back to your site. And with that, thank you, everybody, for joining me as always. As I say every month, this is my favorite part of my job, and I wouldn't be able to do it without you. Thank you all so much for spending your very valuable time with me, for the comments, for the conversation, and we will see you next month.